quality by design, a very important aspect is when you create a protocol, you need to anticipate what could go wrong. That's the first step basically for the risk assessment. The good old failure mode and effects analysis, I hope you have heard of the term already, is the methodology that is the easiest to use. So failure mode says, okay, what could go wrong? And effect, so if it goes wrong, what is the impact of the effect? So this is something that is used widely, and you can very nicely use this in your design of the protocol to be aware of the risks. Upfront contingency plans are also very important, so that once you have actually identified what could go wrong and what's the impact, so through that you can actually prioritize those events, and by knowing what is the most important event from a priority point of view, you can then build contingency plans or put in some mitigating actions for the case that it happens, or with mitigating actions actually to put in preventive measures that things would not happen at all. And of course, learning from past experience is very important. So very experienced people who have worked in the clinical environment for quite a long time are a very valuable asset to this assessment in the protocol design. What is also important, and that was the first piece, what's also important is that you should actually develop some standards. Sorry. So that's in here, the second bullet point. Start developing standards within the company and across companies. Because why am I saying this? We talked about the experts and the past experience. That's all good. But depending on which expert you're talking to, you will get, of course, a very good opinion, and you will be able to harvest the experience of that person. But if you ask a different person with different experience, you might get maybe a different point of view and another solution. Now, which do you take? What are the acceptance criteria? So here it's very important. I'm not saying that you should not involve experts, and that's what I said here. Learn from past experience. Very important to involve experts, but you should involve experts for designing basically standards. So collect a lot of experience, a lot of ideas, a lot of information about how to handle which situation, and then basically funnel them into certain standards that can be accepted within your company and maybe even across companies. I know there are currently a lot of discussion groups, for example, Transcelerate is working on a protocol template for designing a protocol, but also other organizations have done that in the past and are doing it now. So therefore, the approach doing that across companies would also be very valuable to exchange ideas and experiences and then make it into a standard. Very important is also learn from others. Do not try to reinvent the wheel. And I was saying earlier, you have to involve experts, but experts should not rule the standards. So it's very important to actually kill the not invented here and it's my way attitude, because if you have individuals managing and guiding this assessment and the protocol by design activities, it will very much depend on that individual and the opinion of that individual. And once the individual is maybe in retirement or left the company, I don't know, what do you do now? You do not have standards, you only were living off that individual's opinion. So that can be very dangerous and can be very, very unsettling for the company and the whole procedure. Now, protocol writing rules, just a little overview. we can talk about this maybe in the chat room, you know, about some details. But basically, protocols should be short, no duplication or unnecessary information. What I've seen very often in my life in clinical development is that sometimes certain paragraphs are repeated from the beginning of the protocol to a later section in the protocol, and then another author who reads through it and maybe overreads and forgets the first section, the early section in the protocol, sees the second section, which is the same, but makes changes to it, and those changes are not reflected in the other section that was actually a copy, and then those two sections are different, which was not the intention in the first place. That is just one example of how things can happen. So really keep it simple. Don't duplicate or just copy and paste from old protocols, because you will copy and paste the mistakes. If it is a standard text that you actually have approved and that is managed in a controlled environment, then yes, that is okay. I'm not saying you should not do it. And there is a very good way that you could have standard text, like building blocks for protocols. And I know some companies do that. And that's a very good idea to do it. But they should, those building blocks should be managed according to your controlled document management procedures, like you manage SOPs and other controlled documents, version controlled, etc. And that the content is actually reviewed and approved. And then you can use that. Then you can put that in. And it should be marked that this is actually approved content, should not be changed. Then it works, but not in any other way. So protocols should also be simple. Complexity is the breeding ground for risk and poor quality. What I mean by that is that if you, for example, write a protocol that has, for example, too stringent inclusion and exclusion criteria, then you hardly will enroll any patients. And the funny thing is that there was a publication by Ken Getz from Tufts University some years ago that showed that quite a high percentage of protocols were actually amended before the first patient was enrolled. So you had already had a protocol amendment before it actually even went live, really, which is actually a sign for very poor procedures, because and those changes were not due to regulatory requirements. So after submission, after your clinical trial application, the regulators came back and demanded changes. That was not the case in this research. So it was actually mistakes that were made by writing the protocol. That was just one example. There are other examples, of course, if you're trying to collect too many data points. There's sometimes the notion going with the protocol, oh, let's collect this information as well. We might need it, at a later point in time. That is not right. It will make a protocol more complex. It will put more burden on the site, and through this, the more complex the protocol is, the more likely it is that the sites will make mistakes. Leave it out. You don't need the information now. If you actually really need it, then why not run another trial? Because if you keep the trial simple, it will be much less costly, and you will have the money in your budget to run actually another study. Now, feasible protocol should also be feasible. Protocol which cannot be effectively executed will result in quality issues. So feasible meaning that certain aspects you have listed in your protocol can actually be carried out and are not wishful thinking. One example would be that a certain type of analysis can be carried out in a certain country because there is actually a laboratory that can do that, and not something, oh, well, we can ship the sample, the tissue sample around the world and then have it analyzed somewhere else, and that might impose quite a high risk. Depending, if you're using a central lab and you have the right procedures to do that, then yes, but it depends also on the sample. So have a close look whether this is really something that is feasible. Building quality by design into the protocol, as I said earlier, it's the most important instrument for quality risk management in clinical trials. And and try to get it right first time. I know there's, and coming to metrics, there's one metric, I was talking about metrics earlier, but this is a metric that has not much to do with oversight and risk-based monitoring. This is the metric I think is the most useless metric that was invented, which is first patient in. And that is this metric is one of the reasons why many protocols, many trials are rushed to the first patient in time point and are not taking care of all the planning aspects, as I said earlier. Those 3 columns, remember, from the foundation, those are the planning aspects and should be done before you actually have your first patient recruited and not after or during. Because if you do that, then you will actually lose a great deal. And protocol amendments are costly. There's also a calculation where Ken gets that on average, and that's average, phase 1 to phase 4, all of them, on average, one amendment with everything that, is following and caused by it, one amendment costs between $400,000 and $500,000. So it is quite a lot of money that is involved when you do amendments. Another aspect of protocol writing rules is eliminate all parameters and protocol requirements that do not support product's value proposition. So value proposition means we're writing this protocol actually for a certain customer. So who is the customer? Who is the customer of our clinical trial? When I ask that question in seminars I give to the audience, very often I get answers like, the patient, the investigator, the regulators. But all that's not true. The actual customer are the payers who will later decide whether your drug will be reimbursed or not. Because if it's not reimbursed and patients have to pay for the drug themselves, you will not sell much. Those will be a handful of patients who can afford it. The rest will not. So if the insurers say, or for example, NICE in the UK, AMNOG in Germany, etc., if they say no to the results of your clinical trials, we will not reimburse this drug, it's basically all money down the drain. You will never sell it. And that's why you need to focus on the product's value proposition. You need to focus the protocol exactly on this goal. What are those guys expecting who will take a decision whether the drug will be reimbursed or not? And that is something that's very often forgotten when writing a protocol. Very often, the scientists get, excuse me for that expression, overboard, with the app for science and trying to put a very scientific approach into the study, which is, of course, a nice thing to do, but innovation, as it is sometimes called, is not necessarily something that is really helping the patients. And here, what gets reimbursed is really a big step forward in what helps the patients. So and that's another big item. That's why it's very important to actually, when writing a protocol, to involve your guys from marketing, because they will be the ones who will then later have the negotiations with those organizations like NICE and AMNOG and FDA, for the reimbursability of your product. If they are not involved from the beginning and the trial is focused on the wrong goal, you basically will not be able to get the money you actually wanted for the study.